And I'd like to propose a motion that the board in light of the State Board of Education's resolution on safe and welcoming schools for all students regardless of national origin, immigration status, or documentation status, request staff to review board policies with recommendations to the board by the November 2017 meeting.
Second. I'll second it.
I'm sorry, Betty, can you repeat that? Or Kelly, can you repeat that?
Like me to repeat?
If you, to the extent that you've gotten down Betty's motion, could you restate that?
I have to watch the tape. She talked way too fast for me for that one.
Just checking.
Yeah, sorry.
Hopefully I can.
Rather than restating it, is it maybe be easier if you could just say what the goal of this motion is? I'm having a hard time getting my head around it.
The goal is that board staff, that district staff be requested to review board policies that are related to the resolution that we just affirmed, and Reagan, that would include vetting with Oregon School Boards Association to assure that any policy that might relate to safe and welcoming school environments be modified. And I think the intention is to consider the recommendations made by the West Linn Alliance for Inclusive Community. And I actually scanned the policies. I think there may be as many as 14 policies that might apply, and they have to do with the specific ones that that Dr. Ludwig addressed in her guidelines, but they go all the way to sexual harassment, equal employment opportunity, English language learners. Again, there are many related policies, and I think it's an opportunity to take a fresh look at our policies to assure that the language is as inclusive as possible.
Can I ask you another question? So at first it sounded like what the motion was going to do is direct the staff to take the principles that we just affirmed and follow up with the district and the employees to make sure it's not just principles, but they're actually being carried out by some way by the district. And then you went to the Alliance for the Inclusive Community, and I'm not sure how those two things interact. One is about the DACA people, students, and the other one's about basically everybody. So I'm just not sure how they interplay. And if anybody else wants to speak up, they're welcome to.
So in Kathy's guidelines, she mentioned 2. The Alliance mentions 4, and simply scanning the existing board policies, I think there may be many others that relate to an inclusive, safe, and welcoming school environment. So again, I think it's an opportunity to request staff to review our existing board policies through this lens, and actually that's consistent with the resolution we just affirmed, which is to take a look at policies to assure that that they create safe and welcoming school environments.
And that seems pretty clear to me. Dr. Ludwig, does that make sense to you?
I think at some point it'll be a matter of what the board is choosing to do with our review. We may, as a staff, look through the policies and come back and say we reviewed a dozen policies, we feel they're aligned. And it may be that the board, is that what the board is looking for, or does the board want to look at each one of those policies and then determine a definition of what feels aligned to board members and what feels aligned to staff? Because I can tell you that the review that we did of the policies that was pretty thorough a year ago, had current language and, met the criteria that I see similar here. Whether there's specific terms that the board now would prefer over others, I can't guess what those would be around preference for word choice. So we could do one of several things, either just review and say we believe they align, or draw out and find all those policies and present them to the board, and the board could go through them as a group, read through the language, and have a discussion on each as to whether you feel it's aligned as well.
I'll second Betty's motion.
An interesting and tough one for me because I support this work very greatly, and I know that on the ground in our schools, the actions that we're taking support this work as well. I do believe that making change at the policy level is important and impactful. And part of me thinks also, gosh, we could tweak this word and that word, and it's not going to change the good work that's happening on the ground in the school. So part of me has a larger policy question, like what would we hope to achieve by changing some of these words? I don't know if that's a question that can be asked right now. That might be more of a philosophical question on the role of policy. I also feel a little like I don't want to pass the buck. I don't want to just charge the administration with, reviewing policy when that's sort of the board's role. So I feel slightly uncomfortable with just handing that over. I would think it would make more sense to have a board member work closely with a member of the staff and OSBA to review a select group of policies, such as this one that the Westland Alliance for Inclusive Communities has presented to us. So that's a little bit what I'm wrestling with here, why, some of the things I'm sort of trying to reconcile in my brain. For example, number 2, board policy JB, to consider adding the words, around national origin or immigration status, keeping in line with the OBA's wording and resolution. That one seems pretty clear cut to me. We just affirmed a resolution to add that. The other ones, I think, there's room for interpretation and arguing and looking at it. They are a little more complicated. So all that to say, yes, I support this work, and I want to make a smart decision that doesn't just pass the buck nor miss the point. So that's sort of what I'm wrestling with.
I concur it's important work, and I also can identify with the concept of passing the buck. And the more practical approach is, or the more practical side, I guess, of my wrestling with this is that when you ask staff to review all of our policies and come back, we are charging them with work, which there is a time and an expense that goes with kind of such a broad charge, whereas maybe staff time is better spent with professional development that was suggested, or with reaching out to our community and embracing and educating and letting them know of services that are available to them, rather than kind of a more exhaustive approach to our policy review. I do think it's valuable that policy is in place, and again, I would say to the extent that there's an absence of policy addressing racism and bigotry, by specifically utilizing, those words, then I do think that there's a gap in our policies, and we should probably, ask, to have a policy drafted around that language. And to me, that seems to be a more efficient way of ensuring that, we are covering all types of appropriate and inappropriate behavior and the consequences thereof through policy, rather than just a general charge to review all policy.
So the motion is based on the resolution. The number 1 provision in the resolution is, therefore, be it resolved that the Oregon State Board of Education, number 1, urgently requests that all school districts review and where necessary, strengthen relevant policies, procedures, and practices, including those related to student enrollment, release of student records, access to school law enforcement and other visitors, et cetera. So what I'm trying to put into motion is operationalization of that particular resolution, and I'd like to defer to staff because I think you're the experts, and I would hope you could take a look at the spirit of that resolution, look at our policies, and use your expertise and then guide us on where you think we might be able to strengthen our relevant policies.
I'd like to echo what Betty says, that when we just voted to affirm resolutions that say we will review and strengthen our policies. And I do appreciate that this was looked at 12 months ago, but I feel like a lot's changed in 12 months. 12 months ago we had President Obama in office, and Donald Trump had no chance of winning the presidency, and now he is president. We're looking at DACA being rescinded. So I think that enough has changed in the last 12 months that another review is warranted, and I wouldn't expect it would take an inordinate amount of time for the district staff, and if that's the case, please let us know. Maybe we can review other options.
One thing, I love it when things like this occur, and then I think about what we're doing in the district, and I think about this, what's presented in front of us to make these decisions, and I see that they're really organically aligned. When I think about the changes that the district has made around removing from information that we were collecting around place of birth, that was a move that the district had made to stop collecting that information, and so that's just one example of how what we're already doing is closely aligned with this resolution, how we're gathering information, how we're using information, access to schools. I mean, I read what you sent out to our staff. We're going to continue to ensure that our students are safe, and that we're not just giving access to our students, and so it's good. I feel good about that. It's aligned. I'm thinking just about making this a manageable chunk to bite off, because we did just do this huge policy review, and I'm wondering if it's possible to have just the review of these policies that have already been vetted for us by the work of the Westland Alliance for Inclusive Communities. Perhaps we focus on those. They've done research and made a proposal. We could look at those proposals. Or I'm not sure, Betty, if you have other policies that in particular that you would add to it. And so maybe if we're going to kick this to administrators, we make a recommendation to look at particular policies rather than all policies. But yeah, that's one thought here.
So Dr. Ludwig, would that be workable for the staff if we include those suggested by the Westland Alliance for Inclusive Communities, any others that Dr. Reynolds might identify for you, and then do it in light of the framework of the first paragraph of that resolution?
And the framework would be to strengthen relevant policies where necessary.
Right, I think that your comments, Dr. Molitor, were relevant too. If there's a separate policy that we need to deal with now or later, we could do that as well.
Well, when I read that first paragraph, which is what I hear the board asking us to put action around the first paragraph, there's 6 paragraphs. But if we're just dealing with the first one tonight, it would be hard for me then to just limit to the few that were brought up, because I hear the board saying that it's really the spirit of that whole paragraph, which asks us to look at enrollment practices, release of student records, access to school by law enforcement. So there's quite a few. And I would feel that if you're asking us to do that, then that's what we should do. And that by November, it sounds like you'd like a report back to the board that we have reviewed all of our policies aligned to this, which we could do, and then report back the few that, if we find some that are not in alignment, give those to the board to act upon.
Dr. Ludwig, could you share your perspective about the value or lack of value in this exercise?
Well, I'm not a policy geek, but I do always appreciate reviewing policy, and whenever we do as a staff get an opportunity to do that, we walk away saying, boy, it was good to read that policy again. So it's certainly something that, we could begin a process to look through, and I'd probably ask a few staff to join me in doing that. Again, I think when we report back, I think the work then is before this board as to what you want to do with that review. Whether you do want to parse through words, have OSBA come and again have a small group then work through some language of some of the wording, or how to act from there. But certainly we can, with this criteria, go through it, and I'm happy to do that.
So if I could clarify, the intention is to make it as at least onerous as possible, defer to your judgment, and simply the language relates to policies, not the full policies, procedures, practices. It's simply to look at policies, and if you see any that are not, that could be strengthened, consistent with the resolution, to make recommendations to the board for changes as you would do with normal policy changes. So is that intention clear?
We can certainly do that. I guess I would ask that the board as well take the opportunity between now and November and also peruse the policies. That is your purview, and that is the work that a board does. And if you see some in there that you feel are not also aligned, share those with me, bring those to the November meeting. But certainly I think this is a two-way kind of task here, because there may be one that we feel is aligned, and a board member or two may say, I'm surprised you didn't bring up, these half dozen or a dozen that are under my attention or I was wondering about. So it would be very helpful to us if board members could also review and then send our way ones that you're wondering about, or to the group.
All right, I feel like I'm anxious about the time. Let's go ahead and vote on this, and then know that we have more dialogue and work to do as we implement them.
Okay, can we just, before we take a vote on something, I just want to make sure it's really clear what it is that we're voting on. So we're asking for the administrators to review all policies, or just the policies that are presented before us
I
here?
think at this point, we don't even need to vote. I think it's been very clear. We've asked for, kind of as a board, we have collectively directed staff to please look at how strengthening our relevant policies in relation to this resolution of which we've affirmed, and bring it back to us. This isn't a vote. At that level, we can charge them with that, and it's not a voting activity. But I do sense, unless somebody objects, that
I would agree you can make this an ask of the superintendent and staff, and then what we bring back in November may have items for you to vote on, to take action if there were amendments to any policies.
And just noting the fact that when we did a policy review in the past, we did have 2 board members do this, engage in this as well. And so I'm just really sensitive to the fact that that there is an emotional charge to this type of policy work, and understandably so. And so to pass it off to administrators and not take responsibility for that ourselves, I don't think is standing up to our roles and responsibilities adequately. So whether that be just that we take responsibility to review the policies ourselves and be engaged in the process.
Well, my assumption is that we will receive something that the board can take action on based on staff recommendations, as we would do with any policy change.
So do we want to just have this be an ask of the collective board? Nods of the head. No opposition?
Okay, no, I'll withdraw my motion, and Dr. Ludwig, I assume that the ask, I know that in the past, you will take action if the full board makes that request, and so I assume that this is sufficient for you to proceed without a motion.
I'm going to look to the board chair, and she could get nods from the group, which would, I think, be both in the minutes as well as very publicly known that.
Yes, okay. The board is asking that, and I don't see any reason that if you want to offer to have a couple board members participate, that you're welcome to do that. All right, thank you. Let's move quickly to Mr. Middlestetter. Would it help us to move to item 2 and 3 and dispose of those quickly? Or does that interfere with your? Okay.
But there's adequate funding at the state level that it shouldn't affect our finances in the current biennium. That'd be my financial report. If there are any questions or not, I'll move on to our 2 motions or 2 other issues then.
I received an email from Representative Vial saying that the corporate kicker money would be coming back to schools. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding.
And does that increase the amount of money we're getting, or we don't know that?
Not, my understanding is that that will not affect this current biennium's funding based on the time to collect and then time to work it into the budget, that would be a future event.
All right, thank you. Other questions?
Okay. Then moving on to surplus property, and I have a revised resolution that I'll pass out here. Just I was very specific in the resolution and stated there are 14 fryers. It turns out there are less than 14. We're not sure exactly how many, and so I've just simply removed the number. These fryers are like stainless steel. It looks kind of like a double sink when you see them and they have a plug-in. Take up a reasonable amount of space. It turns out that we haven't been using them for a while, and so it's like, hey, can we get rid of these? So that's the issue. So I've revised that just to say less than, just to remove the number completely. Whatever there, we don't need them, don't use them, have not been using them. And so a motion would be in order to pass the resolution if you are so inclined.
I move we approve resolution number 2017-3 regarding surplus kitchen equipment and the deep fat fryers.
A second?
Let's take a vote.
Dylan Hides,
Aye.
Chelsea Martin,
Yes.
Ginger Fitch,
Yes.
Betty Reynolds,
Aye.
Regan Molitor.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. And moving on then, we have, you had before you earlier and have seen copy a fairly lengthy lease that we'd like to renew. It has to do with the cell tower that's in the West Linn back behind the parking lot. That cell tower has been there and the lease has been in force since 1990. And we have it currently holding that now that we own the property. It started with the trips. That will go for a number of years to come. In the cell tower industry, the owners of the cell towers rent space on their tower, and if they don't have it very far into the future, it's hard to get a commitment from companies that are going to want to expand their market. So we're not at the end of the lease, but as is typical in the industry, they're asking to tag on to the end of our current lease and push forward even farther. The nice thing about it is that we've gotten a single amount of rent in the past. They're now offering us that single amount. It's been like $675 a month, somewhere in that range. The new lease will say that anytime they add a new tenant, that tenant will pay for us and bring in an additional $500 per month. So if they add several tenants, the rent will actually go up. So it's a nice lease. They also are asking for a few square foot more in case they should decide to set some more equipment around the footprint that they already have, to the extent that they can without interfering with our parking lot or any of our needs for the land. So that being the case, fairly long resolution, and we have both the full resolution and then I think the last item that's called the third amendment is the attorneys in the group will probably pick up. Apparently, when you have a financial document and it's time to record that at the county, sometimes you produce a shortened, maybe even less specific if you have proprietary information, a shortened document that gets recorded, and that's why there are two documents. Both refer to the same event and the same lease. And final statement on this, the attorney, our district attorney, has reviewed the lease and found nothing detrimental to it. Again, I want to remind you that the lease we're currently operating with this company, have been for a long time. This is an extension and an enhancement. The attorney said he'd be glad to have a lease. If he had some land with a cell tower, he'd be glad to have another one of these. So nothing negative that he could perceive on it. And I'm open for questions or similar motion to approve the resolution.
Doug, can you talk a little bit about the length of the lease? 30 years seems like a long time. How is that number arrived at?
Yes, actually, the choices that we had were an extension of 30 or 50 years. 50 years seems like an even longer amount of time, which it is. Of course, I questioned, talked a number of times to the principals at Crown that are in it's their business to put these leases in place. They said he was not sure if we had an option to come back and ask for a lesser amount of time. We're taking the lesser of the two that they make available. In this industry, longevity is what sells and gives them the ability to sell to tenants on the tower. He said he thinks it's probably a take it or leave it, and that this is a shorter period of time for what they do in the industry. So I knew that question would come up, and so thank you.
Other questions?
I move that we adopt resolution, oh, no, that's not what I want to do. We don't want to adopt the resolution. We want to approve the lease.
Well, a resolution, when it's a financial matter, a resolution is an action from the board, so might be different ways you could do it, but I do have a resolution, so you're on the right track.
Okay, so approving the resolution would seal the deal for us. Okay, so I move that we approve the resolution that I clicked away from now. Is it 2017-2?
Yes.
Second?
I will second that.
Call vote?
Dylan Hides,
Aye.
Chelsea Martin,
Yes.
Ginger Fitch,
Aye.
Betty Reynolds,
Aye.
Regan Molitor.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'll give you the 2 copies of each.
Thank you. Mr. Woodland? And however you want to lead this into Mr. Lake. Thank you, Mr. Lake, for your patience with us.
Sure. Been coming to board meetings for a long time. I know how they work.
All right.
You want me to start off? You want to start?
Well, to the somewhat new board. David Lake is a longstanding member on our long-range planning committee who, when the 2014 bond passed, that committee also took on a dual role as bond oversight committee. We meet regularly and have, kind of alternating between long-range planning and bond oversight. And one of the roles of bond oversight is not only just review projects and test it against bond language and that sort of thing, but also then to look at our financial reports that we produce quarterly. The one that he is going to comment on tonight ended June 30. It's a little late, but as the board was newly forming and all kinds of things happened in the district, we waited until this meeting. So he's providing this report. I will just note that we will close the books again at the end of September, and so there'll be a much fresher one. And of course, as you'll see in my report, there's been incredible progress in the district, both in capital work being done and expenditures being made that would change that bond report. But we'd like to carry on with our commitment to always bringing that report forward, and David is graciously here to do that.
Thank you, and welcome to you new board members. So as Tim indicated, I chair the Bond Oversight Committee, which is the renamed Long Range Planning Committee while we function in that role. You've seen the bond report, the quarterly report, I'm assuming. I will not read it to you. My intent here tonight is to just highlight a few of the points that are important to note in that bond report. As Tim also indicated, it's a little dated. So the pictures show buildings still under construction. As far as I know, we've got kids in them now, and that's a good thing. So by and large, the big projects are essentially done, and there's some closeout that will need to be done over the course of the next few months. I think we as a bond oversight committee could use some guidance from you as a board on how many more board reports you want from us as a bond oversight committee. You know, maybe there's one next quarter, and then, I don't know, maybe 1 6 months after that. I don't know what the right time frame is, but my counsel would be that as the spending begins to wind down, we don't need to come every quarter. Maybe there's a closeout at the end, and we could happily do that. So you can give us some guidance at your leisure on that particular subject. I'll cover a few of the changes that occurred from the bond report in the previous quarter. So as I indicated, the 2 high schools renovation and addition projects are in closeout. The 2 new schools are essentially completed. They're occupied. At the time the board report was written, 75% of the funds had been committed, and 60% of the funds had been spent. There was enough confidence in the cost structure of the projects that just shy of $4 million had been transferred to other projects. I actually want to call your attention to, I need to open the bond report here, the financial table that's on the page 1. That's a pretty telling table, I think, that speaks to how well this particular bond issue has gone. We have a track record in the district of not only, of financial accountability and fiduciary responsibility to the district itself, to the populace of the district, in that we've made commitments about the taxation level that will, and the levy level that will impose upon our population, and we've stayed within that. We also have a commitment to manage carefully the funds associated with bonds, and our track record in previous bond issues has been pretty good, and I would call it stellar. And in this one, this is no exception to that. You'll notice that down towards, so there's really 7 major projects that are articulated here. The 2 major schools at the top actually came in pretty darn close to the estimates that we had as we were walking into the 2014 bond issue. Given I do construction management for a large healthcare corporation here in the metropolitan area, and given the construction environment that we're in today, that's pretty good. So I think hats off to the staff for managing that. You can see that the very last one, improvements at the district-wide level, we originally thought we could spend about $7 million on that. Given bond premiums and interest earnings, we've been able to a little more than double that amount. The security estimate has quadrupled. That's not I don't think that's a reflection of poor management. That's a reflection of we could transfer funds into those projects for other needed security and safety projects, which are needed across the district, especially given some of the conversations that you've had earlier tonight. So I just want to call your attention to how those dollars have changed through the course of time as these projects have matured. Let's see what else I want to call out here. So the technology upgrades, there's a pretty detailed section in your report about what the technology upgrades are, starting with the first phase, which is upgrading student devices, wiring in the building, which is becoming less and less important as we move to wireless. And so that's the third point, which is the access points are being upgraded. This report went into a little more detail about the nature of the safety and security projects, ranging from fencing to safety plans to kitchens to lighting replacements to roofs to enclosures to entryways and other things that are in that classification. So the cash flow actuals were consistent with the projections and in line with the estimated spending, and we believe that the report is an accurate representation of what had occurred through that point in time. So I'll leave my comments there. Do you have any questions that you'd like to pose, either about the bond issue itself or about the long-range planning committee and what its functions are? Yeah, I'd be happy to field any questions that you might have about that.
I thank you very much for your service on the committee and provided an expertise. I'm confused about your approved language changes on that chart that you've been referring to. What does that mean? How come it isn't forecasted as an over amount?
How come?
I think it's just I don't understand the language.
All right. So the columns that I was referring to are the original funding requests. So at the time that we did the planning charrettes and we're putting together the bond issue itself, now 3+ years ago, we were estimating the costs of those projects in those round numbers. The estimate at the completion is the amount that we believe with pretty high confidence that those projects will come in at. What you always want to do is fund the big rock projects first, so the school renovations and the construction projects, so they get first attention. The three toward the bottom of the list then have their estimated value, but we also need to have an obligation to spend the dollars associated with the bond, and so we have an opportunity to put that funding into other projects that are needed in the district that fit those classifications. Is that a fair representation, Tim?
So I'm not understanding the approved changes column. I don't understand the column that says approved changes.
Well, that's just the plus or the minus against the original funding request.
And then I'm wondering why that's not then translated to the forecasted over or under column.
The forecasted under or over. Oh. Why isn't line 1 $774,000 over? I don't know that I can answer that question.
Huh?
I don't know that I can answer that question, but
Does it show it at 0?
yeah, it shows it at 0.
We balance the bond fund every time to 0. With any surplus or money that isn't necessary to support the project where it was originally funded to go to other projects that were contemplated in the bond at the time of the issue.
So the approved changes, is that changes approved by the bond committee, approved by the board?
They went through the bond oversight committee.
But I also hear you saying that there's funding for that in the bond, but that just your predictions were less than those amounts.
Well, there was sufficient money in the bond for at its issuance. There was also the ability at that point in time when we sold the bonds that they actually had a premium associated with them. We were able to fund the bonds at a higher level than, you get the finance guy back up here to explain this better than I can, but we were able to sell the bonds at a higher value than what we originally estimated. And then there's some interest earned on bond funds through the course of time. So those three things together give you your bottom line total. Does that make sense?
So I have a related question. So first, thank you very much for the report and for all that you do for the district. And thank you for drawing our attention to the financial part of your report. So I do have a question. The ballot measure was for $84.5 million in bonding. And then it was later, let's see, the estimate of interest earnings brought that premium up to $98.9 million. So a couple of questions, and maybe they're Doug questions. Have all the bonds been issued, and has the interest fulfilled that expectation to bring it up to the $98.9 million level?
Let's get you on the record, Mr. Middlestetter. Thank you.
Thank you. We still have the $4.5 million to be sold, but that is included in the $98.5 million. It's anticipated. It's waiting until we get closer to the time of need, and then it will be sold, and we will utilize those dollars. It is anticipated in the total number. Did that answer your?
And the second piece of that, has the interest fulfilled the expectations to bring the 84.5 up to the 98.9?
Absolutely, in an unprecedented manner.
Right.
The last question I have is just for the record, DOC stands for?
DOC is where?
District Operations Center.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
Any other questions from the board?
I think Tim's going to show you some current pictures of sites here in just a second. I would also just add, just as a plug for what the next steps are for the Long-Range Planning Committee, now that our activity on the bond oversight starts to wind down. Typically at this point, we'd get some direction from the board about starting up another planning phase. And I think, speaking for the committee, we're probably ready to begin that work and have already started some of the groundwork for that, anticipating that directive would come. So
Yes, I heard that question. And Dr. Ludwig, can you refresh my memory when we're proposing to address that in a work session?
We have a draft time for October the 16th, but my understanding is that is for the board to have a conversation with staff around forward-looking, maybe almost even backward planning of the next bond, and what the board would then task the Long-Range Planning Committee to do. And David, I just want to thank you again for the many years that you've served on these committees. And I remember vividly walking around Sunset when we were at that point where we knew that we needed to replace that building. And it was your leadership during a couple of those summits and work through that enabled us to move through that so beautifully with the community. And I hope you've had a tour of Sunset.
I
since
have
it's been
not,
open.
actually.
Okay.
I need to go see it. I've driven
Good.
past it a number of times.
Good,
But
good.
I've not been inside it, so I look
Well,
forward to that.
very much like Tim, your knowledge and expertise of just even the history of the district is so valuable. And I think leading to that date, it might be that the board chair and co-chair and I could sit with you and even just kind of think through that agenda item. Tim could be there as well, and get some thoughts around what to recommend in terms of our work going forward.
I'd love the opportunity to do that.
That would be great.
So if you want to just.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to ask the board secretary to make that a to-do to help me schedule that.
Okay, great. Look forward to it. Thank you.